Anyway, so the reason I made this video is I actually got a request from a friend of mine who used to be a luchador, and he decided, you know what, this is too rough on my body, I'm going to go ahead and do Muay Thai, which shows you something about his decision-making process. Anyway, but he was having the same issues, and I was going to shoot a video just to show him the exercises that I did to kind of rehab my elbow, and it made me think about this. Before I ran a full-time MMA gym, I used to do massage therapy. I did that for about 6 years. And then eventually I had to make a choice into what direction I was going to go, so I went with the gym. So I have a little bit of a background in terms of dealing with muscular dysfunction and things of that nature. But then, as I started to teach, I started to develop a little bit of tension in my arms, which is not unusual when you're on the mat 5-6 hours. All of that repetitive use, it starts to take its toll. And then eventually something terrible happened. I could barely pick up a large coffee. And at that point I knew I had to do something. So I started looking into ways to treat this. And I went through several different things. I got cortisone shots in my elbow. The first one didn't take so well. I didn't really feel anything from it. I went back in, they reassessed me, and they gave me another one. The second one was fantastic, and I was pain-free for about a year. And then it started to come back gradually, and when it finally came back, I went to a physical therapist for a while, and he worked on it and would dig into the muscles there. That kind of worked okay, but nothing substantial. The hard part is that doing this professionally, or anybody who trains long term, eventually you're going to, as you get older, run into a situation where you're going to either have to stop training, or you're going to have to find a way to manage this and try and head it off as it starts to come up. So I chose the latter because doing this for my job, stopping was not an option. So the physical therapist didn't work that great. I got another cortisone shot, that didn't work that great, and then I was just kind of stuck with it. And so I tried several different modalities for treating this. Eventually I stumbled on a solution that actually worked for me, and I'll get to that in just a second. But first I want to look at it as a combat athlete, as a striker specifically. What is it that causes this dysfunction? Because sometimes, I mean, there's always going to be a cumulative effect if we're throwing lots of punches, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds upon thousands of punches. Eventually you're just going to have overuse injuries and you're going to get inflammation. How you treat that inflammation will determine your longevity in your sport. However, there are some things that we can avoid that are going to help us keep that from happening in the first place. When you're shadow boxing, if you do any kind of shadow striking, you need to not be banging your arms out and having that constant repetitive banging on your form. It's that extension and internal rotation, this right here, that causes that problem. And over again, you're going to run into it. As a southpaw, we tend to keep the right hand a little bit higher and chop through our opponent's jab. So if they're punching with their with their left hand, they're jabbing with their left hand, and I'm firing my right jab over or through their jab and cutting through that jab, that repetitive impact and chopping motion will take its toll. So when you shadow box, don't go power on your shadow boxing, okay? You're trying to warm up, you're trying to work on your form anyway. Don't start banging out your elbows like that. Also, do not shadow box with weights in your hands. Now, don't start sending me videos of Floyd Mayweather shadow boxing with weights in his hands. First of all, when you watch him shadow box with his weights in his hands, he's doing things like little curl movements or very slow rotations here. The problem is, when you're doing stuff with weights in your hands, gravity is pulling those weights down. You're not actually working on the plane of motion that your punches are actually on, but every time if you have a tendency to lock those arms out and punch to extension, that weight is pulling that elbow down here. Okay, it's rough on your joints, and you're not actually adding resistance in the plane of motion. There may be some kind of peripheral conditioning element your shoulders are getting, but if you want to get better at punching, you need to punch. Pure and simple. Adding weights to it is not really going to work on it. I'm not saying don't do strength training. Strength training is important. It's very good for your joints. It's very good for your power. I'm saying give it its due. Do your strength training on a separate day, and when you work on your boxing, work on your boxing. Don't add the weights into it. That'll save your joints, trust me. Another thing we need to look at, if you're doing a lot of mitt work, Don't try and kill the mitts. First of all, if your partner's holding mitts, you're going to blow out or injure their elbows. They're going to end up with like a golfer's elbow on the inside here from trying to hold against those strikes. But even then, because you're not hitting anything substantial, your punches are going to be blowing through here. So as you start ramping up your punches, you start getting better. If you start really digging into those mitts, you're going to start having some issues with your elbows. Also, if you work in a class where you have people holding mitts for you, everyone's told, give a little bit back on the mitts so that they're not blasting through. But don't slap your partner's punches down. Having somebody slap your punches downward as you're punching is going to set up some problems that are going to catch up to you eventually. So avoid that at all costs. If you're going to work on the heavy bag, first and foremost, refine your power, refine the mechanics, move correctly. Then the power will start to come as you start to increase all the technical elements of your game. Don't just start swinging for the fences. You'll see if you have a gym that's got a heavy bag in it, you'll see people go in there and just start teeing off on the bag with terrible form. Those people are going to set up issues if they stick with it long enough. Okay, so let's look at some of our options here. These two things saved my life. Of the two of them, this is the one that's most important to me. It's just a lacrosse ball. You can go to a sporting goods store and get one. Don't get a tennis ball. Tennis balls get squishy, and after you use them a couple times, they start to give a little bit. You want something that's solid rubber. So not a racket ball, not a tennis ball, something that's solid. And that's what we're going to work with. This is a foot roller, and this one works great also. A little higher on the pricey thing and a little bulky. This one I take in my backpack everywhere. It travels with me wherever I go. So when I travel to go do seminars, it's with me. I keep one at the gym so that guys can use it at the gym. I keep one at home. So we constantly have one. I constantly have one available because I never know when it's going to start to seize up again. The area that we're actually looking at in my forearm are these muscles right in here. These are the ones where you're going to feel it. If you already have this or if you suspect you have it, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Any gripping in here, any extension and internal rotation right here is where you're going to feel it in there. If I gave you this to squeeze onto, you'd feel it immediately. When it gets really bad, like in jiu-jitsu, when I'm gripping a lot and pulling a lot, my elbow will eventually feel like it's on fire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out the tissues right here. And I'm basically going to split my forearm into 3 lines. Here, right down the middle, and then on my pinky side. I'm going to take the ball in my hand. I'm going to create pressure right here at the wrist, just above where it bends here. And a lot of times it works really well. I don't have a block, but if you put a block in here so you can rest your hand and it has a little room for movement, then that's what I would do. I'm going to put pressure in the palm of my hand. In about a 1-inch movement, I'm going to rock this up. I'm going to do about 3 times. 3. When I do this, I'm going to exhale as I put the pressure in, and then inhale as I rock it back. So it would be... I'll move it up again. And I'm going to do that all the way up my forearm. Okay, when I get to the top, I'm going to go to the middle of the forearm. Same thing. Rock it up the forearm. Do it 3, move it up, 3, move it up. And then when I go to the outside, same idea. 3, 3. You'll feel it especially right in here. I did anyway. Okay, and that's where, and I can feel it right now actually. There. If you find a spot that really kind of sucks, you can hold a static pressure on there for about 20 seconds and just let it release, and then move on. Don't get overzealous. The first time I got this, or first time I started doing this, it felt so good. I was actually traveling. I was in Bristol, Tennessee, and I found it, and I was just watching a movie, and I started cranking in because it felt really good, and the next day my whole forearm was sore, just like I had worked out with it because I just kept smashing through the muscles in there. So I'll do about 3 runs all the way across. So 1, 2, 3, and do that 2 more times up the forearm. And it feels outstanding. With the roller, I want to get good pressure on it. Same idea. I'm going to divide my forearm into about 3 sections. And this is where I'm going to roll it out. Move it, and then move it up a little more. Do that 3 times, and then move it up the forearm. The massage table is actually not the greatest surface to do this on because it's squishy. Coffee table, kitchen counter, something like that where you can give more pressure. I just don't feel like laying on the ground, and this will do for the video. But I'm going to roll this thing through. But this, more than any of those other modalities I tried, got me back in the game. What I learned to do also is catch it. As soon as it started feeling tense, I'm like, dang, my forearm feels tight. I'd get my ball out, watching TV, and just kind of keep rolling that through. And eventually you start to be able to catch it. I haven't had an issue, although I have had to use this on the regular, I haven't had an issue that's kept me off of the mat in probably 3 years now, right? And this is after trying 3 cortisone shots and all those other things to try and treat it. So hopefully that this will work for you. Again, I'm a little bit out of my lane in this, in that I'm not attempting to diagnose it. If you have an issue, I suggest you check with your doctor, go see a physical therapist, see somebody who really can dig into these things. But in the meantime, try this out. Roll out your forearm tissues. If you're having any issues in here, any issues with a weakened, or not weakened, but a painful grip, if it's weakened only without pain, definitely get that checked out. But if it's just, if you have that weakened pain in there where you're having a hard time picking up things, turning doorknobs also will get you, then by all means try this out and let me know how it works out for you. Thanks for checking out the video.